Einstein's special relativity.
Did you say that you were recording over the previous recording?
What does that even mean?
Like, did you pull a VHS?
And blow on it?
Mikhail?
I don't know how it happened, man.
No, I'm asking, are you recording over what we've already done?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. So we need to address the elephant in the room that
Mikhail doesn't live in
all of
Minnesota
our
anymore?
listeners have been clamoring about.
Mm-hmm.
Who?
Sure.
Name one. I want you to name one for me, Mark.
Me.
Reasonable.
Fair enough.
Is our change in iconography.
Oh, yeah, we did do that.
Ooh.
What do you guys think?
I like it.
I do like it. I'm going to go look at it again to refresh my memory of what it looks like. Is it in the drive yet, or is it only in Slack?
It's on the webpage, so just go to ohacpodcast.com.
Wink, wink.
That was a great plug that I accidentally led to.
Thank you. And thank you.
We should start doing brought to you bys. Oh, new idea. New idea, guys.
Yep.
Have you ever listened to a podcast where they open by saying, like, little snippets by their sponsors?
Yep. This episode of Operation Have a Conversation has been brought to you by an eclectic collection of integrated circuits. Does anyone really know how those things work? Probably not, but boy, do they do some neat stuff.
We should start doing fake ones of those because we don't have any sponsors.
Yeah, I mean, at least next time we can come up. That can be an extra idea generator. Is fake sponsor reads. I'm cool with that.
Fake sponsor reads and hot takes. I just think we should start getting some trends to, like, not to fill in the space. It's not
Some
like we
corners.
don't have good conversations, but yeah, it'd be nice to have, like, little structural things that we do every time.
Create a narrative.
Oh,
Wow.
yeah.
Beautiful.
Okay,
yeah,
well,
so
here's something that I guess we could start, because I'm assuming I'll continue to have these problems, are the Mikhail's struggle with technology. And mostly it's just, I just want to rant about this because I was so frustrated with it today. So,
Is it Audacity?
no.
I think we can probably just do struggles with technology in general. I feel like we'll all once
Yeah,
you start
yeah.
griping, we'll all have a gripe.
Oh, probably. Okay. So anyway, this is a very specific problem for a very specific situation. And that situation is, I like to listen to thunderstorm sounds when I go to sleep. I find, the white noise just helps me, like, not get the tinnitus and help me, like, not focus on things. So right now I
Not
have
get
my
the tinnitus. I really enjoyed that.
He's not going to get the tinnitus tonight.
the ringing in your ears. Anyway.
I understand what you mean. I completely understood. It was very clear.
Okay.
Despite the ringing in my ear.
Okay. Anyway, so what I have, I finally just got this set up. I have one pair of speakers in my room because that's all that I could fit when I drove out to Colorado, and I just got a splitter. So now I have an auxiliary cord which I can plug into, like, my iPad or my computer, and then I also have it. So it's my computer speakers are always plugged into my Amazon Echo, and shut up, Echo, shut up. Okay, sorry, the light came on. I forgot that
Goddamn technology.
Yep. Anyway, so what I thought that little cylinder would really help me, because there's a command that I can just tell it to play rain sounds. But the issue that I ran into is that in order for my iPad or my computer to have a reasonable volume output on my speakers, I have to turn, like, the physical dial on my speakers up to a certain point, and then if it's that high, the volume on my canister, I don't want to say its name again, but the volume on that, the minimum volume that it can go to is too loud. Like, the thunderstorms are just way too loud, even at minimum volume. So what I have been doing is I've just been, like, plugging in my iPad and then just finding a YouTube video of, like, 2 hours of thunderstorm sounds and then just playing that, because I can get the volume down lower. But then I remembered I have I think it's a second generation iPod Shuffle that I brought with me, because it doesn't take up a whole lot of space, and I thought that would be great. I could just load that on there, and I wouldn't have to set up my iPad every time and find that video. I could just have the iPod have just one song, and it would be 2 hours of rain noises. So I plug it into my computer, and this is the first time I've done it in 3 years, and that was in iTunes, an Apple ID. That was my past one, so it didn't get recognized by my computer, and then it locked me out when I tried to reformat it to factory settings. And then it just never showed up in iTunes again after every other time I would plug it in. So that was on my Mac laptop. And then I thought, okay, I guess I should try a different computer just to make sure that it isn't, the cord might have broken, because it's got the very specific weird, extra big...
You have one of 9 30-pin connectors left in the world.
Oh no, this is the Shuffle where it was all through the headphone jack, so that the 1/8" jack is can also transfer
dock
data.
Thing?
Yeah.
Oh my god, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's one of those ones. Anyway, so also I don't have any Ethernet in my room, so I took my desktop and I lugged it out into the living room where the router is. Got that all set up, downloaded iTunes, and then which took way too long. Anyway, I plugged in my iPod, and it showed up, which I thought was great. But then I got it factory resetted. That worked. But then when I tried to load any sort of music into iTunes, it just wouldn't go. It would say it cannot load because this cannot be played. I'm what are you talking about? This is an MP3 file. So then it was an hour of just searching through forums. And yeah, that's where I am right now. Then that's why I was 10 minutes late, because I was trying to shut down my computer, and then it decided to update. So I just left it in the living room. I hope my roommates don't mind.
Why didn't you just put something over the Echo so that
That's
it was
what I was
just
going to say.
quieter?
Just put a pillow on top of
Thank you.
It's okay. I don't have the big version of that. I have the small version, and so it doesn't actually use the speakers on it. It's connected to my computer speakers, my nice speakers.
Yes. I have a much shorter but equally frustrating technological problem that I experienced in the last week that I think you will both find very funny.
Okay.
So I am taking my final class for my undergrad online, which means I have to submit my homework assignments online, which means that if I have handwritten work, I have to scan them in and then combine them as a PDF and then send them. So, after I combine them, I use a website called combinemypdf.com. It's very convenient because I don't have premium Adobe Acrobat, because who does? So
hardly anyone.
I use this website. So after I combine them, out of paranoia, I always check how it looks to make sure that it didn't misorder the pages or put them upside down or who knows what. It's never really happened. I've never had a problem with it before. But this most recent time, I couldn't see one of the pages, and Adobe told me that the reason I was having problems was because I needed to download an update for Adobe that was a Japanese language pack, a Japanese font pack for the PDF reader. What? So supposedly, my handwritten page full of calculations and work was written in Japanese.
It tried to OCR it or something?
I don't know. It didn't even try. It required me. The moment I downloaded that, I opened the PDF and I could see it. I have no idea what happened, but that's what it explicitly said. It wasn't just a general update. It was, this is the Japanese language font pack.
Huh.
It was.
Did you install it?
Oh yeah, that's when it worked.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, then you're good.
I demand understanding of my technical problems.
Huh.
Well, I have another one.
Hold on.
Short.
I just want to. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I just want to feel superior for a second, because on Macs the default PDF viewer called Preview just has a feature where you can drag and drop PDFs together to reorder them. It's great.
On Linux, there are command line tools to do that.
Of course there are.
There's probably some open source stuff as well to do it. I've just never needed to do it. But
anyway, so continue with your airing grievances against technology.
I was having fun. Well, because I've been using Ubuntu for so long and, don't have much to worry about. But I have a desktop, and as we learned the last time we recorded, that has caused various issues with recording because my USB mic cannot be used by two programs simultaneously. So I've been trying to use my laptop, my Windows 10 laptop, and the other day, well, I guess last week, I was recording with Grant. We were starting a new podcast, and I was trying to get everything working.
Which is called
Comical Start.
Uh-huh.
You can find it on iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify.
I will definitely check that out.
Oh, thanks. But, so, I'm trying to record. I'm like, okay, well, my computer has an inbuilt mic because it's a laptop, and so then I can use that on Skype and the external mic in Audacity to make a nice recording. And so I go into Skype, and it's not finding my internal mic. I was like, well, that's frustrating. And I couldn't figure it out, and I finally ended up just doing a phone call with Grant and recording the phone call with an app, and that worked fine. So, but then, obviously, that wasn't a long-term fix. So, I went in and updated a driver for the whatever sound audio stuff that controls all these things. I update it, I go into Skype, and sure enough, it finds both microphones. I'm all good to go for the next time. Until I plug in my headphones, and everything starts playing out of the speaker still. Now it wasn't recognizing my headphones, which is arguably a worse issue.
Yep.
And I couldn't get that one figured out until I needed to get onto iTunes, because in order to submit a podcast, you need to have your account verified on iTunes. So you need to install iTunes. But to install iTunes on Windows 10, I needed to update to the newest version of Windows, which apparently it wasn't going to do automatically for me. So I spend an hour and a half or whatever, however long it takes to update to Windows 10, or update Windows 10, and lo and behold, all my drivers are fixed, everything's working, and I'm all good. Because Windows 10 magic, it all breaks until it doesn't.
Oh,
so
good.
That's where I'm at.
Well, I guess for both of you, so do you think going through college helped you with being able to figure out any of these problems?
Are you trying to segue into our originally planned topic?
You see, if you mention the segue, then it doesn't work as well.
I'm gonna, as part of the show notes, I hope you do. After talking about technology, Mikhail naturally leads us into a wonderful conversation about our time in college.
Well, I'm trying to.
Trying and failing because of his two show co-hosts.
Yep. Well, okay. I'll actually answer your question, though.
I'll grace
Thank
you with
you.
a response.
Yeah. I would say no. I don't think that college in and of itself actually provided me much in the way of dealing with these problems. Partially because I was already somewhat technologically literate and kind of knew how to deal with Windows at least. And then switching to Linux was sort of an independent decision. Because I did it during a summer when I was bored at like 2 a.m.
Oh, that's
all
when
Linux
the
switches
best
do.
decisions are made.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But that's been the biggest thing, is just switching to Linux distributions and playing around with that sort of stuff has made me understand a lot more. And as far as technology stuff goes, that's probably been the biggest thing for me, has been playing around with all that stuff. I don't think... Maybe being in college has given me the time to do such things. That's probably about it, though.
How did you start on looking into Linux, and where did you go for information? I've been very interested in doing this recently, but I just don't really know where to start, so it's kind of intimidating.
I think part of it was obviously I'd used Ubuntu in the CSE Labs computers
Okay.
when doing, I think it was DiffyQ was the first time where we always went to Lind Hall.
You remember that, Jack? Good times.
No, it wasn't. Don't lie to me.
At least we were together.
I don't know if that makes it better. Like, if we were stuck together on a desert island with no food, would it be better because we were together?
I mean, I would think so. I enjoy your company, Jack.
I guess it's marginally different. I guess it'd be better if we were together because while you were sleeping, I could kill you so I'd have a source of food.
Oh, god damn it.
That reminds me, I'm going to try and find it. It was one of the first Smosh videos that I ever saw.
Oh.
Like OG Smosh videos from the early ages of YouTube.
God. You just gave me indigestion.
Hey, they had some good ones. But... Okay, so how did I get into Linux? I think I was aware of it, and then I think it was just a late night and I was just Googling stuff, and I just kind of knew that it kind of existed, and I was like, well, I don't know, I was looking up just kind of, what are the benefits and why would I want to use it? And also part of it, I think at that time I was still flirting with computer science stuff a bit more than I am now, and honestly, like, now it's pretty obvious. It's just so much easier to deal with anything programming related in Linux than on Windows. Like, I tried to set up stuff in Windows earlier this summer, and I don't even know how I used to do it, how I managed to do that freshman year, because it's so much harder.
In what way? Like, set it, because you can, on Windows, you can just download Visual Studio and use it as a compiler. Like, so what exactly do you mean by that?
I think the process of like installing a language onto your computer for use and how it's integrated into your system, just being able to do everything via command line is just so much nicer in Linux.
Which you can do on Windows, but it's a much bigger hassle. I've been talking about it with my boss at work. We've been working on a project together. I've basically been trying to learn Python in the context of a project that requires immense skill in Python. And so the way I've joked about it to people is that it feels like I'm trying to learn the French language by reading a French microbiology textbook.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because he basically told me, like, yeah, you're going to have to learn, like, a lot of years of Python experience as quickly as possible. So here's a book. I'm like, okay, sounds good. But that makes sense to be able to do stuff from command line, because that's what he does a lot of the time. He's much more computer savvy than I am and talks about using, on his personal computer, he uses Linux. So it just, that was part of what reminded me of how you use a bunch of different versions of Linux and have favorites. And I just can't relate to that at all, that level of computer knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, from my experience, if you're using a full IDE for something like Python, then yeah, it doesn't really matter because they always have its own console instance. Yeah, the Python console instance there. But that's also somewhat Python specific because you can do it in a console versus other languages you can't. I don't know. I think it also gave me a greater appreciation for how, having only taken one computer science course, like, you're much more aware of how, I think, just the general way that a computer language works. You just have more info about that from your classes.
Okay.
That's fair. Like how a language actually interacts with the computer at various hardware and software levels. I didn't get any of that, but doing it on Linux and seeing how all of it kind of is really similar. There's a lot of symmetry in how you do stuff in a command line with any language, even like compiling stuff in LaTeX in a command line. All that sort of stuff, it's just very similar, and that made me, I think, appreciate how it all sort of interacts.
I'm going to tie this back into the topic that Mikhail brought up. So you mentioned that it appears, and I use appears very deliberately, it appears as though I have this wealth of computer knowledge. And I would agree that I have a substantial knowledge now, much more so than I had a few years ago, on what programming commands really mean in terms of software and in multiple languages how to code.
Stop.
Yeah.
Are you clicking things, Jack?
I will put it down. I'm playing with a flash drive. I do
Yeah,
need a
I
fidget
can
toy that's
hear
much
it
quieter.
clicking
Yeah.
a lot.
We
in the
need to
background.
find some sort of fidget toy that's just like quiet. Something that doesn't click.
I'm done. I'm done clicking. I promise I will be
just
done clicking.
pull on your leg hair or something.
Ow! But then my voice will get all shrill.
That's better than clicking in
Just
the
like
background.
tie and retie
better than
a
clicking in the
shoelace,
background.
maybe.
That would be smart. Well, I don't have that. I'm just gonna keep talking, and I'm not gonna click anything. That's gonna be my
Okay.
solution for now. It's a short-term fix.
So you're talking about the knowledge that you have of computer stuff?
Yes. I was thinking about where to start again. In the course of my undergrad, I gained a lot of what I would consider more abstract knowledge about how a computer functions, what programming commands mean in terms of the lowest level of software and hardware. But I think the amount of practical applicability that I learned is sorely lacking, and that I believe that in your free time, you have probably gained far more knowledge of how to actually utilize the things that I seem to know for actual applications. If we were to combine our bases of knowledge, I'm sure we'd have a much better total understanding of computers, but you don't need to know the things that I know to do practical things, whereas I don't feel that I have the experience or knowledge to practically apply what I know, which is a big problem that I have with how my undergraduate degree was structured.
Do you have an example?
Oh yeah, I don't know how to do anything. I wish I'd done way more projects. I don't know
mean,
how
like,
to do
like something that's specifically that, like, what's an abstract thing that you were taught that you feel like just doesn't apply to what you're trying to do?
Well, it's not that the abstract things that I know aren't true. Like, I know a lot, like, you've taken a course in assembly, right, Mikhail?
Yeah.
At least one. We can both look at higher level computer code, and we know effectively what those commands are on the root level without even having to disassemble them in the compiler. Like, we have more of an understanding of what that means. But aside from trying to make a program as efficient as possible, I have no use for that information. It's just neat. It's like how I have this in-depth knowledge of how individual transistors work, and a phone has billions of transistors on it. Like, my knowledge is just cool. Like, I can explain it to people, and it sounds neat. If I were to, like, there's no job I'm going to find outside of, like, PhD level crazy research work at which that will matter. And that's somewhat frustrating.
I gotta say, right, I think you're onto something, but I feel like you might be just making it
Short-selling myself?
Short-selling yourself. Yeah, because at least I took a course in machine architecture, which is where I learned some assembly code, and I think the biggest thing that I got out of that class is not how to write assembly code, because I crossing my fingers, I will hopefully never have to ever do that.
I agree. Very relatable.
Yeah. But I think the bigger thing that I got out of it is just to have, I have a much better idea of what the boundaries and limitations are of certain kinds of computer interactions. Like, I feel like I have a pretty good understanding now of why there's such a big difference between, for example, like our computers built with like an x86 architecture versus like ARC. So at least I've listened to a couple of tech podcasts where they've been talking about how, in general, like bigger computers usually use like the x86, and that's like, pretty common. But now they're considering that they might be able to shift that to ARC, which usually, or is it Arch? I might be pronouncing it. Mark, do you know what I'm...
Well, I thought they were talking about switching to ARM processors.
ARM.
ARM.
Oh my god, yes. That's what I was trying to say.
That makes more sense. I now have much more comprehension of what you're talking about.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Anyway, so ARM, that's generally used on like smaller devices like your phone, and like I think my iPad runs on an ARM architecture, and so it's just like it was helpful for me to like get to know like what the differences between those are a little bit, just to have a general idea of why that issue matters. And I feel like that's what a lot of like the value that I got from a lot of the classes that I took is not like the specifics on, not like learning syntax or like specific equations, but it was more just like getting a feel for the boundaries of the subject.
I agree with that. That's a reasonable, more optimistic take on our college education than what I was saying. So I guess where I would go from there is that one primary frustration that I have now that I'm entering the job force, there is an implicit assumption amongst companies that when you are coming into their company without job experience, that you will basically have to be taught from scratch like an idiot because you don't know anything practical. This may be an engineering specific thing, but I wish that I had much more applicable project experience because there's a significant difference between coursework and more practical company work. And I think that it would have been totally feasible for our courses, like the fact that we spent 4 years and came out with primarily theory with a hint of, because you're completely right that you gain a much better understanding of the intuition behind a lot of this stuff, and that is something that you definitely need to have. And there are people working in the field that don't really have that intuition, even people that went to school at one point and just lost that intuition. And so I think that's a very important thing to have, and I'm going to try my best to hold on to it because I think the more abstract theory is like one of the most beautiful things about it, like understanding the underpinnings of physics. Even if I never have to use it, I just find it so interesting that I don't want to lose that knowledge. But I feel very unprepared for working for almost any company based on the knowledge that I have from my undergrad.
So I'm curious though, what do you think you're lacking? Do you think you're lacking specific technical skills, or are you lacking just more like organization or being able to like work with a larger team?
I guess what I would say specifically, if I'm applying it, so if we were to look specifically at like, say my current internship, I work for a small medical device company in Maple Grove, and a lot of what we do is research and development and design testing of our existing device. It's not like we're inventing something new out of thin air. And so a lot of what we do, I guess what I would say is that specifically looking at my major as an electrical engineer, we were looking at creating things from scratch, and we weren't looking at existing things and modifying and improving. Like looking at a large scale device that is so complex that there's no chance that you would understand every facet of the device, but treating it more as a black box with certain behavior and needing to be able to model it and do more like small scale testing and understanding, I guess, more the nuances of how it behaves. Like my classes made it sound like what I would be doing is designing something from scratch. And I don't believe that there are many people that do that type of work, especially by themselves.
No, I definitely hear what you're saying. I want to say like that's a very common thing with coding as well. Like if you're a coder, you probably aren't writing a whole lot from scratch. And I gotta say, I would say I think in my computer science courses, I did have a little bit of experience where they would throw a piece of code at us and then say like, this does this. And then either we would try to integrate that into some larger part of the program or have to make some modifications of it. But I will say, I think that is a skill that I would have liked to have developed a bit more. So yeah, I agree with you. Like I feel like it's not very common to create something from scratch, at least in like a technical field, like electrical engineering or coding. Mark, thoughts?
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess what's been on my mind, I found it just even from the beginning of what Jack said, which is like, oh, I have more practical knowledge or experience or whatever in this very particular thing, which is, I guess, operating systems. I don't even know exactly what I would say that I, have that knowledge in, but it sounded really weird to me to hear for you to say that, because as someone in a math major, I'm just not used to that. I look at the way that you get to do math, and it's really foreign to me. Because so much of my classes were proving from foundational levels various aspects of math, and then, using it here or there, but not really, versus you guys had to, at whatever level you're doing multivariable calc and Fourier analysis and all that sort of stuff, you were using these sorts of math just as tools, versus the fact that those tools can exist was my field of study overall. And so it's been, I'm so used to being on the side of having the very abstracted knowledge and not using it all that much in a lot of cases. Like, I can, but I don't.
It's like the polar opposite. It's like always working from foundations, whereas in our fields, we almost have to, I guess physics is probably different, but in my field, I am effectively dispensing with the foundations as soon as possible and working on a higher level and just assuming that things are going to behave the way I expect. Like when I'm designing electronics, I'm not doing like physics 2 electromagnetics to make sure that all the wires are operating the way I expect them to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a
I guess
different
that's the
level
best
of
comparison I can make.
It's like a different level of abstraction that we're working at.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, I think I'm probably somewhere in between, because in physics, it was a lot of, we would, see what we can neglect, what, things are small enough where it doesn't really matter that we can, focus on just a few parts of the equation. But then there was always, like, when you get an answer, you have to go back to those fundamental principles and see, does this answer actually make sense?
So, in physics, you're kind of taking some, either some previous theory and expanding it, or working with it and seeing if your answer makes sense with what we, observe in the world. And in engineering, I feel like oftentimes you're taking those physical principles and approximating them in a way that's useful to you at the sort of physical level that you're working at. And in math, we're kind of, at least pure math, we're just kind of starting with some interesting principles and then just going from there and seeing what we can figure out. But none of it really matters in a broader sense. The techniques matter, but the specifics don't.
You're not going to use it to cook your food.
Yeah, like the fact that, the fact that, an electrical engineer needs to know binary, that doesn't, in a pure math sense, doesn't matter. How we represent numbers doesn't matter to us because they act the same way.
True. Binary is just convenient.
Yeah, exactly. It's a convenient way to have a sort of mapping, between logic and numbers and other, things like that. But
and the physical properties of semiconductors.
Yeah. But on a very pure math level, the integers work the same way, however you decide to represent them. Okay, so Mikhail, what did you want to shift to then?
Oh, so I was going to talk about, I wanted to ask you guys about what you thought of your college experience and, like, how that played into the development of your, like, social skills, so moving away from courses. So I guess what I'm thinking about is that, to me, college seems like, this amazing opportunity to have, thousands, or was it like tens of thousands of people who are all in, like the same age group approximately, in a very small space, and just have like so many opportunities to interact with each other. And I thought that was really valuable because I got to experience people on a much broader level than I think I would have, or that I had. Even being in such a large high school, I think moving to college, it was like an exposure to a lot more different types of people.
Do you think that... I guess I'm not gonna I'm not going to try and put words in your mouth. What did that exposure, do you think, what did that do for you? What effect did that have on you specifically?
Well, I think I got more social, as in like I figured out how to talk to people more easily, or I guess another thing I think I've found is that I was able to start figuring out how to deal with certain kinds of people, and this might harken back to our first episode about personality types, but I guess when I started thinking about that, looking back, I recognize how I dealt with some people versus others in different ways, and it, like, just to make things easier for myself, if I approach a person who has a certain personality type in one way, it might be easier to, I don't know, I guess, for lack of a better term, get what I want from them. I guess I'm thinking in terms of like group projects. I think I got a lot better at those in college versus high school, because I understood that nobody likes group projects, but I still, you have to figure out how to wrangle people in a certain way. Does that make any sense?
I love group projects.
Really?
I love group projects. That's why I'm an engineer and you're a physicist, Mikhail.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose.
To tie in my perspective, I guess, I completely agree on the wealth of opportunities that college provides. I wish that I had taken more advantage of them and participated in more student groups. I think that I would have met more people that I had more in common with. I'm trying to figure out a way to replicate that experience outside of college. Like especially now that I'm going to be moving to a new city where I'm not going to know anybody except for Sarah, my girlfriend, for the context of the viewers, whoever they may be.
Yeah, dude, I've been dealing with the same sort of thing. It's weird.
I knew that'd be relatable for you because you just moved somewhere where you don't know anybody. But I need to find a way to make friends, which I'm pretty good at, but I'm not going to be good at it if I never am in a situation where I can meet anybody. So I need to figure that out. And so it's almost going to be a new experience in which I take a part of college that I didn't do well during college and try to do it outside of it. And I think it's going to be very interesting because now it's going to be more difficult. I feel that it's easier in college and that the amount of time that I spent on coursework made it more difficult for me to use that time in that way. But now that I don't have that burden resting on me, I think it may actually end up being easier.
Yeah.
But I'm unsure.
So I just want to insert something in here because I know, obviously, I think all of us spent a good amount of time on coursework. But I will say, I think there was a certain aspect of us, I think you can think of it as the difference between actually living on campus and being, in that sort of physical area for the, community and exposure to people versus, say a commuter. I think the social experience is completely different. Even if you had similar, like, technical experiences.
I agree with that. Mark, what do you think on that?
I mean, yeah, obviously, at least specifically with the commuting point, yeah, it would be really different. And, I knew some people who I would meet in some classes who were either PSEO, which would also be really weird, or
Young
were
ones.
or were just straight commuters, like, as freshmen, and I think, yeah, you definitely miss out on a lot. Because for me, I think, as far as the friendships that I developed, most of it, honestly, was kind of confirming or building on friendships that I had already made. Like, if I kind of take stock of the people that I'm likely to keep in contact with, now that I'm going out to San Diego, it's going to be almost everybody, like almost everyone is going to would have gone to Wayzata, and then a couple of people who I was a CA with, who didn't go there. But other than that, I didn't really make many friends, like in my major or in the dorms. And as a CA, you're just kind of, you kind of make friends with a couple of people that you work with, but other than that, you're stuck with a bunch of younger people for the most part. And I think most of what college did for me socially was make me understand more what I look for in a friend now that I'm kind of going off and not going to be able to just see people. Like, for example, Mikhail and I can't have lunch every week anymore, you know?
Which I'm all broken up about, by the way.
I know, we're gonna have to like Skype each other from our respective local.
You guys are going to have a 4-hour or 3-hour time change, so that'll be really tough to line up your lunches.
It will be.
Nah, it'll be easy. But anyway, I don't know. So I think that was the biggest thing for me is just, and I kind of had a trial run last summer, being out in San Diego, and that also helped me sort of like look like, okay, who are the people that I'm still going to kind of talk to in this situation.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Hey Mark, I just want to jump in here because I would like to make make the difference more apparent, like, because it sounds like you're talking about, figuring out how to make like lasting friendships, which I think is important, but I also think that there's another aspect of being able to make like just acquaintanceships or like, short-term friendships. Then I think that's also something that is important, being able to make friends with somebody that that you're probably not going to, be in contact with them after you either, graduate from college or you move away from a certain job. I think being able to make, those kind of, I guess, surface level friendships is another important skill, which I think I've developed a bit.
I guess, leaving high school, there were so many of those, just with people going different places. It was already sort of a known thing. And for most of college, that was sort of my default, I guess, with people that I met. Especially people that I met in math classes. Like, there are some people who, I would always talk to in math class. I'd see them around campus and we'd chat for a few minutes and all that sort of stuff. But I always kind of knew that, like, this is just the friendship that we're at.
Oh, yeah. Well, don't you think all friendships start that way?
For the most part, yeah. I would agree. But that's what I'm saying is that those sorts of friendships, that's why I focus more on, like, the long-term kind. Is that my default setting is like, you're a friend that I have in this context, and once this context doesn't exist anymore, odds are our friendship probably won't either. Like, we're not going to just like randomly connect at some other point. And I think what helped me realize that pretty early on was working as a camp counselor. My first summer out of college, like, you work with these people in a very kind of stressful environment. You're really close to them. You're working and you're living with them for 3 months. You're doing everything with them because you're kind of stuck in a camp together. Like, even when you go out on a weekend, you're all going out together to the restaurant half a mile down the road.
Yeah.
And so you make these really good friendships in that context, but there's maybe like 1 or 2 people who I met who I've talked to since outside of going back to camp for something. Okay,
do you think there's anything wrong with that?
No, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Okay. My point is just that I've grown very comfortable with those sorts of friendships and being able to just say, yeah, that's it. I don't know if I've told you guys, but to a lot of people, I'll just say, like, have a good rest of your life. Like, and I mean it, like, but it's just like, that's just how I
it's not a bad
look
thing.
At these things.
No, I know, yeah. But just like the way that he said it was like,
very blunt. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's just kind of how it is. Like, I don't.
Yeah, don't lie to yourself.
Well, as in, like, I'm the kind of person who would happily reconnect with whomever from my past.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of just acknowledging that I'm not going to do the pleasantry of us both saying it, even, like, if it's never actually going to happen.
I think an important way to contextualize this that I think will make this all, in my mind, make more sense is that we have to keep in mind that we are all in a very transitional phase of our lives in general, like moving from the epoch of your undergraduate degree off to something else. And it just so happens that all three of us are moving away from the place we've lived our entire lives for what is the foreseeable future, I guess. And so I think it's just a very interesting, like, it's very obvious in our minds that there are people that we were comfortable with for years that we will probably never see again. And we have almost no, like, negative emotions around that fact. It's just, well.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm definitely going to miss a bunch of people from Minnesota. I do.
Oh, yeah. And those are the other type that Mark was talking about. There's the people that you know from class and don't have a tight emotional connection to. There are many people that were pretty good friends of mine from class. I don't even know their last names. And I don't really need to. And they're just not going to be a part of my life anymore. And that's just how it is. There's no hard feelings. It's not like there was a rough break or that they're going to be upset if I don't text them. That's just how it's going to be. But there are good friends from Minnesota that I'm going to miss and I'm going to keep in contact with. And that's just a distinction that is just a fact of life, I feel like.
Yeah, but I think that's, this is an interesting time because we're coming to a head where there are people who might have been just, a friend in a certain context, but the thing is we've been in that context since we were born, in the context of Minnesota. So then moving away is like, now that context is, changing. So yeah, I think it is interesting to see like, what friendships turn into, the lasting ones and what were ones just of, like convenience. But I guess the point I'm trying to get at is that I think a skill that at least I'm trying to work on right now is just being able to make friends wherever I am. Because, it's always like, I feel like I want to be just prepared for when I move because I'm probably going to keep moving throughout my life. And I just want to know that I'll be able to actually, make some connections whether or not they're lasting or not. I don't think that really matters to me all that much, especially as I get older, because I do have a bunch of friendships which I know that I can just stay in contact with no matter like where in the world I end up.
Oh, don't flatter us, Mikhail.
See, for me, I think I have the opposite problem that you do, Mikhail. That's very interesting.
How so?
I think I am very good at just making friends with the people around me, and I am really bad at keeping in contact with people that I'm close friends with when I'm distant from them. Like, I wasn't good at keeping in contact with people in Minnesota when I was in Norway. I just wasn't. And that was only for 4 months. Like, I can't, like another example would be like Aaron, who goes to school in Gustavus, which isn't even that far away. And I'd almost never communicate with him, even though I'd consider him a really good friend of mine. It's just, and that's just nature of it. It's not as if there are then hard feelings when we do communicate, when one of us thinks to text the other. It's not like, oh, our friendship has fallen. It's just, it's very comfortable, and it doesn't feel normal to me. I feel like somebody that you're close with, you remain close with long term and communicate with them more often. And I know a lot of people that have those types of long distance friendships, and I just don't feel that I even have that in my life, and it feels very odd.
Something that I've been trying to do, because like I have been trying to figure that out these past 3 weeks, it's like, how do you be a long distance friend? And I think you just need to make excuses to talk to people. At least in the beginning, it helps to have, some sort of structure. Like, I guess while I was still in undergrad, like I kept in contact with a couple people through letters, and that was a great context because it's not like the immediate response. So it's not like texting where you feel like, oh, I need to respond to this, like within a certain amount of time. But if somebody sent me a letter, then I could, just read it, and then I could, spend a day or two, writing a response. And then it was actually really nice having that buffer time where it took like about a week for the letter to actually arrive. So then it wasn't like we were in constant contact otherwise. So then we actually had things to say in the letter. And then it's just like, you get a letter, so you feel like you need to make a response. And, otherwise, like, if you send a text message, there are text messages which you don't need to send a response to. So I think it's just, like, trying to figure out ways to, like, kind of forcibly have interaction. Like, this podcast is a great example. We're getting to interact, and we're doing it, with some sort of structure. And, there's the expectation that we're going to be recording another episode.
That's a good point.
I feel like I'm somewhere in between you two, where I feel fairly comfortable with the long-term, long-distance relationships that I'll have, but still a little worried with how frequently we'll be in contact.
Mm-hmm. But
also putting myself in a position to, like, have people physically to, like, go hang out with. Whatever, in whatever context that may be, whether it's joining, some sports teams or whatever else. What was I going to say?
Sports teams are a great thing to make friends with.
Very true. But what I was going to say is I kind of, not necessarily focus on, but at least when it comes to long-term friendships, I'm interested in what you guys think about the type of friendship where, if you're writing letters, say, let's stick with that context, is most of what you're writing, like, talking about what's been going on, or is it about a separate topic? And I think that there's a difference between the friendships where, like, oh, you see them, you get together, and you talk about what's been going on, but you don't talk about much else, versus friendships where, like, yeah, obviously you care about them, so if something's going on, you'll talk about it, but there's also the dynamic of talking about something else.
Substantial. Something more substantive that, like, something more meaningful, I guess, if that is kind of what you're getting at.
Yeah, like when you look at the time that you may spend talking to a significant other or something like that, that's a necessary thing. You can't, like, spend all, like, if you see your significant other every day or every other day, you're not going to spend all the time with them that you're talking about what each of you have been doing since you last saw each other. That's not something that you can really do. So you got to be able to talk about something else.
That actually reminds me of an interesting observation that I think maybe Brady had on Hello Internet, is that, like, depending on how close to someone you are, like how often you're in contact with them, the scale of things that you talk to them with, like, that of things that have been going on, changes. Like, he was saying that, Brady and his wife can talk about, all of the little tiny things that happened in the day, because, that it's like, just a bunch of new stuff that's going on. But he was saying, like, if he hadn't seen one of his friends in, like, a couple months, then he feels like he can't just share those little things, that have been going on. It's like, the big changes, like, where has he been traveling to, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's different than what Mark was talking about, but I completely agree with it as well, that you're not going to tell, like, if you see a friend that you haven't seen in 6 months, you're not going to tell them about the weird donut you had yesterday morning. Like, you're going to talk about something a little more long-term impactful on your life, like something like, oh, I'm pregnant. Not a great example for me, but
oh, you changed
I don't know,
jobs.
Jack, I feel like
that's a better one.
We would start about the weird donut that we ate yesterday.
I totally would talk about a weird donut.
Well, especially if I was being gassy. I need an excuse.
No, you don't.
Too real. Oh my gosh. I love not talking about what people have been doing recently and talking about, I don't know, I like talking, like, deep philosophical truths or things about science, or, like, I just like talking about things that have some amount of depth, and I feel usually that what somebody did the day before, it's interesting to an extent, and I can have that conversation briefly, but it's not something that I can participate in for a long time and feel that the conversation is worthwhile, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel
it's something that I always have trouble with.
Yeah, I feel like the ideal situation for me, if I'm talking with somebody, is that you have the pleasantries, And then what I try to do is like, just see, ask them what they did in their day, and then see if you can like take one of those topics and then maybe lead it into the direction of a more deeper conversation about, just something rather than just like what's going on. But I feel like you kind of need those pleasantries to like, as a launching pad to get there.
It kind of depends. So one book that I finished reading that I probably told you guys about, I don't really remember, the book Quiet that I was reading.
I don't think you have.
Okay. It's by a lady named Susan Cain, and it's largely about how introverts should operate in a Western culture that's largely dominated by an ideal that says extroverts are the kind of correct or superior personality type in many places, particularly like the business world. One study that she looks at in the book is they got groups of introverts and extroverts, and they paired up introverts with introverts and extroverts with extroverts and had them have like a 15-minute conversation. And then, right afterward, they paired up an introvert with an extrovert and had them have conversations. The introverts had little to no small talk. They just kind of jumped into whatever sort of topic that they wanted to talk about. A book that they had recently read, or like some other topic that didn't directly relate to either of them. Or perhaps related very deeply to one of them. If someone brought something personal up, they were perfectly comfortable just diving right into it. Both the introverts. The extroverts stayed very, like, pleasant, surface level, talking about their profession and the weather and, like, oh, what did your kid do? Blah, stuff like that. Like, they're strangers, but it was kept on a very mild level for 15 minutes. When the introverts and extroverts talked together, naturally the extroverts talked a bit more, but eventually it got to deeper subject matter just a bit more slowly. And after that conversation, the extroverts who talked with introverts reported saying, "Oh yeah, it was very refreshing to have someone who really felt like they were listening to me." I don't know. So I feel like depending on the type of person you are, like you'll have very different comfort levels with the sort of small talk that takes place and have a greater desire for other types of conversation.
So I'm going to put aside my gripes with the methodology of this experiment. And
well, I'm being pretty hand-wavy and talking about it as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to assume that the methodology is sound and then go from there.
Mikhail, just cutting you off quickly to alleviate those fears.
Okay.
I am on the Wikipedia page for the book, and it says that the book Cain cites research in biology, psychology, neuroscience, and evolution.
Okay. Well,
in regard to just the science of introversion versus extroversion and just personality types. And yeah, so I will just assume from that it's a pretty well substantiated book.
Okay. I just want to know, like, how did the introverts just like start the conversation? Do you just be like, trying to think of an example.
What do you think about the night?
Sure. Or something else.
I mean, it was more than likely something along the lines of like, what do you do? Or it's just some lead-in question, and then they just ran with it a bit more than the extroverts would have. The extroverts probably would have jumped ship once it got, just the sort of few word answers or kind of surface level stuff. The introverts probably would have delved in deeper, asking probably more probing questions.
I thought of an example. So, like, what do you think about the hologram interpretation of the universe? Hello?
I'm going to put in cricket sounds there. Well, I mean, I would ask, what is that? Because I honestly don't know what you mean.
Okay, maybe it wasn't the hologram. It's like the idea that we're more likely in a simulation than actual reality.
I hate that. I hate it so much.
Why?
Because I think it's a terrible way to live your life. It's like being a determinist.
Oh my god.
So I recently watched, just speaking of that,
The Matrix?
No, I wish. But I recently watched I wouldn't call it a debate, it was more a discussion between Sam Harris, who is a neuroscientist and one of the most famous, I would almost call him a vehement atheist on the planet. He's famous for writing books on meditation, but he doesn't believe in free will. He believes that it's entirely determinist, which is very reasonable to substantiate with science, but he was having this discussion with Ben Shapiro, who is known primarily for politics, but he's a very religious thinker primarily. He's an Orthodox Jew, and he obviously believes completely in free will and believes that to the extent that science defines us as being deterministic creatures, that it doesn't explain consciousness fully. And the funniest part of the discussion was that they opened it up to questions from the audience, and a woman asked, I agree with Sam Harris that there is no free will, but I have an 8-year-old. What do I teach him? And Sam Harris basically said lie to him. Because if you tell somebody that we live in a deterministic universe, how the heck are you supposed to, try at anything? How are you supposed to be motivated to work hard if you're just a ball of meat with quantum mechanical fluctuations in your head that you can't control?
Okay, I have a very big bone to pick with determinism. So the first thing is, like you said, it's not helpful. If you tell an 8-year-old that they're determined, every action is determined, that's going to kind of mess with them a bit. And second off, I don't think it's true. I don't think it's true at all. And it's mostly because of my studies of quantum mechanics. And I saw this very convincing argument about, given by, what was it? I think it was Jeff Boob. Can you
say that name again?
Jeff Boob.
Can you spell his last name for us?
B-U-B.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Anyway.
We're college graduates, Jack.
Okay, anyway, he wrote this book called, I think it's Banana World. And I didn't actually read the book because it's way over my head, but I had a professor take a section of that book in which he explains the fact, he gives this very convincing argument as to why there can't be hidden variables in quantum mechanics. And so it was couched around the discussion of, because Einstein was very, as most people know, he was not satisfied with quantum mechanics when it started being developed, because he thought that the way that things were happening, if you have two entangled particles and then you separate them, you measure one and then you measure the other. If you do this a bunch of times, you'll notice that they're completely correlated, or I guess depending on the situation. Anyway, the point is they're correlated. And
God doesn't roll dice is the quote.
Yeah,
that's what he said.
Not exactly what I was going at, but you're close. So he, in this paper called the EPR paper, which is written with two other of, I think it was his postdocs at the time, maybe. Anyway.
At Princeton.
At Princeton, yeah. So they gave two options for quantum mechanics, and this was at the time, so 1935. More developments have happened since. But they had two options, and that was either quantum mechanics happens faster than light, or it has some hidden variables. So faster than light is, if these two objects are going to be correlated, but you can't tell how their states are going to be measured beforehand, then either they're going to be communicating with each other to make sure that they come out opposite, or in the correlated manner, and they're going to do that communication faster than light, or hidden variables, which is like when they're entangled, it's like they talk to each other and they agree beforehand which way they're going to turn out so that they are correlated. So it's like, they're passing notes before they're separated. That's what hidden variables is. Obviously, from Einstein's special relativity, we know that it can't be superluminal, so it isn't happening faster than light, because nothing, not even information, can be traveling faster than light. But then, so they concluded that it must have been hidden variables. And that was the thought for a lot of physicists, that it might have been hidden variables until the Bell inequalities were tested. And that showed that quantum mechanics can have no hidden variables. And I can't go into it because I would need a whiteboard and some understanding of probability. Anyway, but the point is, you can prove that quantum mechanics can't have hidden variables. And so I feel like that right there is a very convincing argument to the fact that the universe is not deterministic.
That was wonderful. I really enjoyed all of that.
Thank you. Something I learned from college.
Hey, look at that. We're tying it all back.
Full circle. All right.
Oh.
That was great.
Well, are we feeling okay?
You want to move on to hot takes?
About what?
I think I want to move on to hot takes. It's been
All right.
a while.
It has. So I heard Jack has some prepared this time.
Okay, Jack, who do you want to ask?
Oh, I will ask... Who should I ask with this?
You were asking Mikhail last time, if that matters to you.
Let's do the opposite.
Sure, let's do the opposite. Okay, Mark.
Yep.
What do you think of esports in the Olympics?
I think it, well, oh my god. My initial, hot take doesn't make any sense. Slightly delayed hot take. Honestly, at this point, kind of makes sense because I'm just kind of falling out with the Olympics. I don't like them very much anymore anyway. So I think either we need to go back to original Olympics stuff, or we need to allow any feasible competition. So let in esports, let in darts, let in bowling,
pool.
I say either go all in one way or all in the other way.
I like that answer. That was well thought out.
I like it too.
Okay, Mikhail.
Yep.
I want your hot take on wooden pencils.
I see no reason why they should exist anymore after the invention of the mechanical pencil. It's clearly superior because it's never going to change length, and you can reload it as many times as you want as long as the mechanical functions don't wear out.
Fair enough.
Okay. All right. Jack, I want to hear your opinion on swearing in front of kids.
Oh, it makes me very uncomfortable. I have done it on occasion with much regret. It's just something that I really don't like, but that happens. And sometimes it's not on purpose, which is more understandable. But sometimes it feels like people don't care, and that makes me upset because I think while we do have to raise tough kids because we live in a tough world, you don't have to do something like that so early. And sometimes kids are so young, and you watch their parents swear in front of them in public, and it's so upsetting to me. I don't know if it bothers you guys as much as it bothers me, but I really don't like it.
All right. Hey, Jack.
Yeah.
I don't know if this was you, but were you clicking during that?
It was me. I am a clickaholic.
I could just faintly hear it, but that means it's going to still show up. All right, that's fine.
I have a problem. I need to go to a CA meeting. Okay, so does this mean... Yeah, it's my turn to ask Mark. Okay. So, Mark, what do you think about steroid use in professional sports?
I mean, my initial reaction is just that I don't like it. And that's just because I'm a baseball purist. I think it's... I don't know. I feel like arbitrarily it crosses some line that we have created and that we're trying to stick to. And I don't know. But I also don't know enough about what we classify as steroids and what athletes are using otherwise to really know how reasonable the line is, where it is. So as other people have said, it would be interesting to have a totally steroid-happy sports competitions just to see what would happen. But it would also be equally interesting to have, you in the 100-meter sprint in the Olympics just for comparison.
I think that would be phenomenal. That's completely unrelated, but I think that's a great idea. To have the normie guy representing the nation of normies in the Olympics. It's like
Exactly.
It would be so much more impressive to watch the 100-meter dash if just like a random person from the audience was alongside them and you could see the difference.
Oh,
Section 117, row 12, seat 4, come on down.
Can I tell you guys one of the coolest... This is going to completely interrupt hot
That's
takes,
fine.
but can I tell you
That's
one
fine.
of the coolest facts that I learned about Usain Bolt?
Sure.
So, do either of you know what a force plate treadmill is?
Nope.
So, it's somewhat self-explanatory from the name, but it's effectively a treadmill that measures the force of your impacts with each step. And so from that, they use that treadmill to determine a number for an athlete that is they divide that force by your weight and they get a number. So they're normalizing it against your weight and getting a number that is what multiple of your body weight you impact the ground with on every step, right? Because you'd think that if you were running, the force that you were hitting the ground with would impact how far you go and how fast you go in general, right? That's intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So the average person who is pretty athletic and works out quite a bit has a force plate treadmill number, if they are really pushing themselves, of like 1.7 times their body weight. Like that's
Okay.
like pretty like on the higher end of normal non-freak people. And Usain Bolt's force plate treadmill number is like 6.7.
What? Oh my.
It's
Awesome.
absolutely unbelievable. And that's why, because using force plate treadmill numbers, you can determine if you do a force plate treadmill reading of all the competitors in a marathon, you can determine the top finishers by just ordering them by those numbers. It is almost 100% accurate. Because the higher your force is, the farther you go with each step, assuming that they will all finish the marathon going at that rate. Because obviously Usain Bolt could not run a marathon landing that hard with each step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, he would just burn out. He would lose all of his energy and die like less than a mile in. He wouldn't actually die, but he might die. Who knows?
Interesting. Very cool.
Just fun facts.
All right.
All right. Are you ready, Mikhail?
I am ready.
What do you think about jelly-filled donuts?
I'm not a fan because it always drips out and it just gets everywhere. It's so messy. And also, I don't really think that the ratio is always off. It's like there's way too much jelly for the amount of breading that there is. And then it's just like, and if you set it down, it starts to leak out. It's like, I mean, come on, I'm not going to finish an entire donut without, like, not set it down. I don't eat those that fast. Let's see here. Jack, I want your opinion on pull chain switches.
Like for lamps?
Yes. Or ceiling fans.
They're so annoying because if they're light enough and you bump them but don't grab them, they start swinging around and then they're even harder to grab. I don't know whose idea that was. I guess it makes sense. I don't know why you wouldn't just have a button. I guess it's just a longer button. So it makes some amount of sense. But I don't think they're super practical, especially in 2018. We definitely don't need them anymore. Just connect it to an app on your phone if it's too high up to reach with your stubby T-Rex arms. That's the end of my hot take.
I like it.
All right. One more time around?
Yeah.
All right.
Good, I only have one left. All right, Mark. What is your opinion on designing humans with CRISPR?
Man, you guys have such, like, actual, like, serious stuff.
The ceiling fan pull chain was serious.
Well, last time you ended with a super serious one.
Oh, how do you know I won't this time? Sorry,
I
sorry,
don't,
hot
but I
take,
don't have
go.
to deal with it.
Oh.
Okay. So, designing people with CRISPR, I'm kind of just generally morally against, I think. I don't know. It just really rubs me the wrong way. I think there's a difference between sort of, I guess it depends on the extent that you're talking about. There's a difference between like designing a human versus sort of actively looking at their genetic history and taking action against sort of genetically caused diseases that trend in the family and allowing that to happen. But also the sorts of things that would even take more attention away from things like adoption are also sort of questionable to me.
That's a great hot take. I agree with your opinion completely. Mm-hmm. That was just interesting to hear your take on that.
Although the second follow-up is that if we get to a point where, I don't know, would it be reasonable that if you can design humans, that the need for adoption would decrease? Would people be happier with their kids or less happy?
Oh,
probably less happy.
Probably less
happy. I think
happy.
You'd have like an expectation.
Child inequality.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
You have to pay for loot boxes for a better kid.
Oh, no. For loot boxes, E3 brand kids. You have to get the DLC. Okay, yeah, we should move on. This took a turn.
All right, Mikhail, this one is cherry picked for you.
Oh, good.
What do you think about paper money?
I think that we should probably start phasing it out in a more deliberate manner than it might be. And then also, if you're going to have paper money, you should absolutely make it durable. Like, you should be making it out of polymers that can actually get wet. And, just like, I think, it's very important to have the security features on them as well. But overall, I think if we can start to phase them out, that would be good. But yeah, if you are going to have them, you should try to make them, so that they don't get destroyed. Kind of like, U.S. money is not very durable compared to like, Australian or pound notes. They're not very easy to, like the polymers aren't very easy to tear, and you can get them wet and they'll be just fine.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Jack. Hot take. If you're raising a kid, when do you tell them that Santa isn't real?
Oh, I just had this conversation with my parents. It's very tough for me because you don't want your kid to be the first one to know that Santa isn't real because that kid's a jerk. And you don't want your kid to be the last one to know that Santa's real or that Santa isn't real because that kid's an idiot. Which Mikhail should know is from Joe Rogan's stand-up.
Oh, yeah.
I just ripped that off completely. But that is definitely something that I agree with because I think the tradition of Santa Claus being involved with Christmas is fun. Even to this day, my family will joke about which gifts are from our family members to each other and which ones are from Santa Claus. And I think it's a fun tradition to have, but it is a very gray transition between using Santa Claus as a joke and using Santa Claus as a truth that you are indoctrinating your kids with. So do I have to put a number on it? I'll say that if your kid doesn't know by the time they're 7 or 8 at the latest, you need to tell them. Because I think at that point they should start knowing some things. And if they don't know that a fat man isn't coming down their chimney every Christmas to give them stuff, I don't know.
All right.
That's it. That's all I have.
Well, that's all, folks.
That was...
I'm going to stop recording.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to stop too.